So hello everyone. So just in case people weren't here earlier when I was talking, I'll reintroduce myself. So my name is Nancy Bostock. I'm a consultant paediatrician, but I work at the Croft Child and Family Unit, which is an under 13s child and family inpatient mental health unit. So I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about our model at the Croft, which I'm going to talk about in the second half of my talk. But the first bit, I just want to think a bit more about our attitudes and beliefs in society, and what we say and what we do around food that might have an impact on our relationship with food. I was really interested to hear Wendy talking about the fight between health and hedony, which is a bit about what I'm going to be talking about now. Okay, so I want you to all imagine a dinner table, maybe a dinner table when you were a child. What was it like? Did all your family eat together, and were there rules around the way you ate? What was the conversation like? Did you enjoy it? Was there conversation around food or healthy eating, about eating too much or too little? And were you praised for eating a lot or told off for eating too much? And were there rules around what you ate? For example, having to finish your dinner in order to get pudding. And did your parents or siblings make comments about the way that they looked? And did people talk about diets? And did everyone eat the same thing? Or were some people following particular diets for different reasons? And what impact do you think that this had on you as a child? So when I was a child, dinner times were generally pretty good experiences. We all ate together as a family every night, and my mum was a good cook and presented us with a balanced variety of food. And we generally got on well together. There were a few rules around the way that we ate, so table manners, but whenever my mum made a comment about that, my dad would always tell us that if anyone judged us by the way that we ate, then they weren't worth knowing. So sort of counteracted those rules. But my mum would also repeatedly and daily make comments that she was too fat and desperately needed to go on a diet. She'd look in the mirror and say, "Oh, look at me, I'm so disgusting," and would sometimes reduce what she ate at dinner time. And these comments were at dinner time and at the other times of the day. My mum isn't overweight. She's really active and incredibly fit. And I've only recently begun to realise what language and like that had, what the effect it had on me as a child, and inevitably through to adulthood. I think that children don't always understand everything about what children's saying, and it takes time for our development to catch up and understand the nuances and shades of grey. Thinking about this, as a child, I used to have a nightmare about my mum going on a diet because I didn't really know what a diet was. And my mum talked about it with such emotion and dread, and so it was clear to me that it was some sort of terrible, torturous punishment, but evil necessity for anyone who ate too much. So I've drawn you a picture about what I thought a diet was when I was a child, and conveniently my skill at drawing on a computer is exactly the same as my drawing skill as a 6-year-old, so I can give you a really authentic vision of what I thought a nightmare diet was, and I absolutely believe this. To add to that confusion, my parents would also encourage us to eat more food after we had finished. So they'd say things like, "Can anyone eat the last fish finger? It will go to waste if no one has it." Or, "There's 5 roast potatoes left. If we go around the table and everyone has one, then they'll all be gone because it's not really worth saving them for just a few." And then my dad would also constantly be reminding us that he was born in 1944. By saying, "For those of us who were born in the war, we'd never even seen a sausage, let alone dream of leaving it on our plate." So it was quite confusing. There was messaging around eating more food and eating less food. So is eating food good or is eating food bad? And is leaving food on your plate good or bad? And I think this gets worse when you start thinking about cake. So cake is represented a lot in the media, especially for children on children's programs. It's often portrayed as being a really wonderful, exciting and delicious thing, I mean, look at this cake. What child wouldn't absolutely believe that this had been designed exactly with the intention of enticing them in? And I think the grown-ups really endorse that, don't they? You know, when cake's around, people will say, oh, is there cake? And they'll look excited if there's some available. And we make a big fuss for children on their birthday about making cake and letting them choose what they want. And in the cartoons and children's programs, the characters are always coveting cake and chasing after sweets. But then equally, we get this message that cake is bad, and it can be really vilified. And grown-ups might say when they're offered cake, oh no, I shouldn't, I really should be good. Or, oh, I love cake so much, I'm such a pig. There's really emotive language around it. And this language also exists around vegetables too. We've all seen cartoons and stories where the children don't want to eat fruit and vegetables, and fruit and vegetables are depicted as being disgusting and not something that's worth eating. But then there's some really targeted songs to encourage children to eat vegetables. So there's one about peas that just sticks in my, I just can't help it going round and round in my head. So I think the overall message that children get is that you should like cake and sweet things because they're delicious, but you should eat vegetables, but they taste disgusting, which is quite confusing. And there is evidence that children are less likely to eat something if they're told that it's healthy, and that's got to be to do with the messaging that they get around it. So I've just got a little sketch. So I've watched that video far more times than is necessary to do this presentation, but makes me laugh. So just thought of a few things that I think you'll recognise that we all say, and we don't mean any harm by these things, but it's often what we've all heard growing up, and probably things that we say too. But it does impact on us and our behaviour and our relationship with food, and I think it's worth being mindful about them. So there's also lots of messaging around body shape. So there's lots of negative messaging about being overweight. So children's stories in Julia Donaldson's The Highway Rat, the rat gets horribly fat from stealing and eating everyone else's food. And there's positive messages about being slim from, Wendy talked about this earlier, but from adverts and adults and schools and healthy eating lessons. And toys. There's incredibly thin dolls like Barbie. So I probably everyone's heard that Barbie's got a really low BMI of 16, which is really underweight, and that weight is associated with a reduced life expectancy that's the same as similar to that of being obese. So, and playing with Barbies and ultra thin dolls has been shown to increase concerns about body image for children. There's also constant messaging about diet and obesity being bad for your health, especially with the COVID epidemic, and messaging around the increased mortality associated with obesity. And there's widespread advertising of diet and weight loss clubs, which is everywhere in the shops and outside schools. I think I almost don't want to mention social media because it's so huge, but it's a vast repository of unhelpful messaging in all directions. And I think the like culture has been particularly identified as being harmful to children and young people. And we certainly have children on our unit with eating difficulties that are on TikTok and have got followings of 20,000, which I think is really unhelpful. So I just want to take a minute to think about your own relationship with food. When was the last time you heard someone else make a comment about their weight or someone else's weight, or a morally charged comment about food? And when you last looked in the mirror, what did you feel? And have you ever been critical of your own body shape or the food that you eat? Children are very good at picking up what the adults are subconsciously thinking, and there's lots of research demonstrating this. So difficult thoughts that we might have about ourselves are likely to transfer to our children. And that's not trying to blame anyone, it's just thinking about the messaging in our society that we could influence and make a difference to. So everything that we experience contributes to the development of our world view, and the conflicting messages that children may develop, that they get, means that they develop a confusing relationship with food and body image, that we should or shouldn't eat things, and learn not to listen to what our bodies are telling us about whether we're full or hungry and what we want to eat. But there's so much messaging around that makes it difficult to think about those things. So I think that really the predominant message is that there's a moral imperative attached to food, body shape and eating behaviour, and that the predominant message is that slim or thin equals good and overweight equals bad. But I think it's important to think about how toddlers and children their relationship with food and parents, because parents are really activated by what and how much their children eat, which is it's a totally natural thing. We all, as parents, we all want our children to eat and to grow, and I think it's a really fundamental need for parents to feed their children. But children are often encouraged or boundaried to eat more. It's really confusing. And I want to think about why this matters. So we have to eat food several times a day, every single day. And our relationship, because of that, our relationship with food is really important for our sense of well-being and happiness. And having an unhappy relationship with food may contribute to the development of eating disorders, of over or under eating, and mental health difficulties surrounding this. And we know that eating disorders are rising. They were rising before COVID, but since COVID, we've had a fourfold increase in referrals to our inpatient unit. And as Wendy was talking about earlier, obesity is also rising, and lifespan shortened by both being over and underweight. And I think that really they're two sides of the same coin. Also, children quickly learn that their parents are activated by what, when and how much they eat. And that might be something really simple, such as children learning that their parents will do anything to get them to eat. So if they refuse to eat a certain food, parents will give them their favourite foods rather than let them go hungry. And although fussy eating is to a certain extent a really normal part of development, it can contribute this can contribute to a more restricted eating pattern. It can take really many positive experience of food before children accept it as part of their repertoire. Yeah, so we just need to be mindful of that. I think that children can also use food as a way of managing relationships around them, and it can become quite extreme. For example, we've seen children that will only eat food prepared by one particular person, which can serve the purpose of keeping that person close to them. So if they have attachment difficulties, then they can use food to help manage that relationship and manage their environment. Yeah. So I think also if we assign a moral status to how much we eat and consequently our body shape, it can be very damaging to our self-esteem. So if we don't feel that we're doing well enough, this is really problematic. So thinking more about what we can do about it, and what we need to think about in the children's hospital and the messaging around food. I wanted to talk to you a bit about the Crofts where I work. So some of you heard a bit about the Croft earlier. We're an under 13s child and family inpatient mental health unit, and we have children admitted with all sorts of difficulties, with neurodevelopmental difficulties like ADHD and autism, and OCD and functional disorders, and children with difficulties eating, and combinations of all of those things. Children might have difficulties with eating because of anxiety around contamination of food, or specific anxieties or sensory difficulties with some or multiple food types. and overeating, and children with restrictive eating associated with anorexic thoughts, such as fear of putting on weight and body dysmorphia. So the approach to food at the Croft needs to cater for children who have a comfortable relationship with food, those who overeat, and those who undereat for all of those different reasons. So we do have to cater for a lot of different needs. And we do have tailored approaches for some children, but ultimately our aim is to enable all children, whatever their difficulties, to be able to function in the world again, so that when they leave the Croft, they're able to participate as fully as possible in life. And that might mean being able to eat together with family and friends, go out for dinner, and to attend parties in school. And I think that's the same for children who are admitted to physical health, to Addenbrooke's as well. So I've got a video with, so at the Croft we have a housekeeper, Michelle, who is full-time at the Croft and mainly hangs out in the kitchen and is responsible for managing the food, and she's going to talk a bit about that now.
We have a very large communal kitchen which has got an island in the middle and two ends, which has all the equipment and cupboards, but there's always two separate ends that they can, if there's more than one family in, that they won't get in each other's way. Adjacent off to that on the left hand side is a very large lounge, and then on the right hand side is the dining room where all meals are eaten together. We have a whiteboard on there where they do the ordering, anything that they require or we're running out of, we put on there. We'll discuss all matters to do with food, and it's generally to make it feel very homely, like they're at home, and that everyone's welcome, and the kitchen is there as the hub of the unit. Lots of discussions are made, lots of tears are spilled, but everyone talks and supports each other, and very much the kitchen is the hub of the Croft. Most parents are very nervous.
Hang on, I'm not quite ready for that one yet, so sorry. So just to explain a bit more about our model, so we try to stick to try to replicate a school day where children go to school and they don't usually see their families from 9 till 3. So parents prepare breakfast and dinner for the children with staff support as required, depending on what's happening. And if parents aren't present on the ward, then staff can do that for children. And then our staff team prepare lunches. So that might be Michelle or one of our other healthcare assistants. The kitchen's shared between the staff and the families, and that's really important in the model, which I'll talk a bit more about later. And we usually all eat lunch together, so not always, but so I can go and have lunch with the children and the staff, and there's always staff there having lunch with the children. And this is great because it gives everyone opportunities to spend non-clinical time together and to support children who might find meal times difficult by lively and appropriate conversation. So there was a great quote, wasn't there, from one of the children in the video, saying that chatting and laughing with friends makes eating time go by, and that's just so important to what we do here. This normalization of eating is so important for everyone, and being able to participate in fun and normal life again is just crucial in recovery for children and families. When children come to the Croft, even if they don't have particular eating difficulties as the reason for referral, they'll often put on weight and grow during admission. And I think food is just such a huge part of our lives, and normaling and modelling a positive approach is so crucial for our health. So I've got Michelle here talking again about how this approach supports families. There was a question in the chat earlier about how we support families, and I think this is really helpful for that. Oh, hang on.
Most parents are very nervous and feel very uncomfortable when they first arrive on the ward. So we try to normalise that, and as I say, get them to know where everything is in the kitchen. They might bring a drink in the kitchen and have a chat with me about things they do at home, about different recipes, about different things they could try. It's having that someone they can talk to and support them, and with the other parents know that they're not the only people struggling with this. The other families sometimes make a really good bond, and one of the parents might make a meal for 2 or 3 families at night, and another night another mother. So this gives them the experience to try different things, eat with other families, and again all get to be friendly and enjoy the experience together. The parents do a lot of groups themselves, one of them being family therapy or drama. And some of them really struggle or find it quite hard to begin with. So they'll come out, they might be a little bit distressed, angry, fraught. They'll come in and they'll make themselves a cup of tea, we'll have a chat about it. Sometimes a couple of us will sit with them, and it puts them at ease and they understand why they've done these certain things, and it's quite normal to feel how they're feeling, and that will pass, and that the groups and therapy they're having are really going to help them.
So I think Michelle's described really nicely how that positive therapeutic environment that exists when you have this model supports families. So I've just put down a few of the things that we do at mealtimes to support families. There's lots to, I'll try and keep this brief. So eating together is hugely important, and something that we've heard from all the comments earlier on in the day. But managing conversation and messaging at the dinner table is sometimes challenging because of all the reasons that I've talked about before. And parents and staff might be anxious about food themselves, and there's different ways of approaching it. We all have our different approaches, but thinking about that and the impact that it has is important. So, for example, some parents or some people have a really controlled way of managing their own diet and exercise. So maybe if they're going on a bike ride, calculating in detail how many calories are burned when they're doing the exercise, such as including the wind speed and gradient and number of layers of clothes they're wearing, and then calculating how much they can eat to counteract that, which is, that it's fine to do that, but it's how we manage conversations around that at meal times. I think children with we've mentioned this before, but children with autistic traits may really particularly struggle with this messaging because it can be interpreted in a very black and white manner. I've met many children with restrictive eating where the trigger has been healthy eating lessons at school, and obviously there's lots of other things that contribute to the development of eating disorders, but I think that it can be unhelpful. I think understanding why behaviour is developed is really important. So there might be trauma associated with mealtimes, as Deb said earlier, and for example, an abusive parent that berates a child at mealtimes for the way they eat or look, or a child that feels a huge amount of pressure academically, mealtimes might be associated with conversation about siblings or other people and their achievements, which may be really tricky, and restricting food might be a means of escaping those unbearable conversations. So thinking about portion sizes is really interesting, and we actually quite often have conversations on the ward about what is and isn't a reasonable portion size, because it is different for everybody. So thinking about that together with parents is really important. In my training as a general paediatrician, I've come across many parents who are worried that their child wasn't eating enough and that they weren't finishing their dinner. But they're growing and have lots of energy, so thinking about that together is really important. Also working with parents when children's difficulties are really tricky to manage, and children might have a really extreme emotional reaction when asked to eat more or less, and helping to parents to sit with that and giving them strategies to manage it is much more easily achieved when we have this model of eating together. So I just thought that there's some things that we could all do to improve our relationship with food. So I think be kind to yourself. I think there's a lot of us that look in the mirror and say and think negatively, but I think we can all look in the mirror and say, look at that amazing body that allows me to enjoy life and go for a bike ride or a walk every day. And speaking negatively, if you can avoid speaking negatively about yourself or anyone else for what or how much they eat or their body shape, and trying to take away any moral language around food, and not holding one food group up as better. So for example, if you eat all your dinner, then you can get pudding, because that teaches children that to eat more than they might want at dinner, and then eat even more for pudding. We try to avoid using food as a reward or a consequence. So if you don't do your flute practice, you can't have any dinner. We would try to avoid. And if you do this, if you brush your teeth, then you can have a sweet. And then allowing children to choose how much they want to eat. So the purpose of this is to allow them to learn to listen to their bodies. And I know that that's tricky for some children, and some children do need specific support in helping manage this. But generally, we can let children choose and listen to how much they want to eat. And I think overall is just eating and enjoying food together. So we've heard lots about the importance of food and how important it is, and the cultural aspects of food too. I'm going to go back to Michelle, because this is my last slide, but I just want to talk a bit more about the importance of the shared kitchen space for families and staff, and about how we can think about that for the new Children's Hospital.
Families are very wary of staff. They have to build up some trust and to know that we're there to support them, and we're all thinking along the same path about the end product and how we can all help this child and the family. At first, I think they feel perhaps a little bit uncomfortable or not quite sure when staff and professionals sit with them at mealtime. But probably after a couple of days, they find it's really useful in their time here. They build up a rapport with the staff. They'll try new things, and if the children see staff eating certain things, they think, oh, actually, I'd like to try that. So the families, as the parents and the children, build up this rapport and trust with the staff, and it really helps in their journey here.
So I'm not quite ready for any questions. I've got a bit more to say. I can't emphasize enough how important the shared space is. I think that I would encourage you all to come and visit, COVID allowing, just to see what it's like, because we use this space to really build a therapeutic community. So staff will go in and make a coffee, and I might catch up with a parent that I've just had a really tricky conversation with. And I think that as health professionals and families can sometimes start thinking of each other as other, and really working in healthcare is the most human thing that we can do. And I think acknowledging that and sharing these spaces does so much to bring everybody together. I'm thinking about that concept that we need time away when things are really tricky, and I think that's right. We all need opportunity to have space away from really difficult situations, but equally I find that having a conversation or sharing some food with a parent makes such a difference in improving that therapeutic relationship. And I think equally between families, we've had lots about that this morning, but that the power of families coming together and sharing things together. And at the Croft, they can, as we've heard from Michelle, they can share meals together and cook different things for each other, and really enrich each other's experience and share their difficulties. I think it's the same for professionals, between professionals. So sometimes we might not bump into the HCA, the healthcare assistants very much, or the psychology team. But when you have this model, then we share that space, and you can go and talk and say hello. Michelle, I don't know if Michelle's here right now, but I'm sure Michelle can tell you lots of examples of when it's been really helpful to be in the kitchen and understand what's happening for the families and being there. So I think it's just massively important for us and our model, but I also think that it's absolutely transferable to an acute hospital setting. I'm a paediatrician, and I've trained, I've done all my training in acute hospitals, and there's so many of these issues that we have in mental health are the same as in physical health. Obviously, there's some differences and lots of considerations about how we make that safe, but I think that these aren't insurmountable, and having a model where we can share kitchen space would solve a lot of the problems that we've heard about today already.